Network to the world. Subscribe now to the Hot 97 YouTube channel. It's Ebro in the Morning with Laura Stiles and Rosenberg.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we're getting into this Aaliyah conversation with the new book from our colleague, Kathy Landoli. How are you, Kathy?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. The new book is called what?
Baby Girl.
Baby Girl.
Sorry, I'm jumping because I'm a
known
fan.
as Aaliyah.
Baby Girl, better known as Aaliyah.
All right, so this is, as Kathy, I'm sure, knows very well, as a super fan of Aaliyah and somebody who's a journalist and been following not only the story of Aaliyah, but worked on many other things. You can check Kathy's resume. She's done some great work out here. Kathy, you know this is a very sensitive topic. So before we even get into the details in this book, I wanted to give you a moment because I'm sure you've heard from fans or other people that are like, why are we still talking about this? Let Aaliyah rest, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So I wanted to start with you articulating why this is important to you and why this work needs to be done.
Well, I think that's become like the catch-all, let Aaliyah rest. But Aaliyah's not resting if you're saying the wrong story.
Okay.
You know, if the conversation that's being had about Aaliyah, you're talking about an incredible icon whose career was bookended by two very tragic events. And if that's what dominates the conversation, even in 2021, 20 years after her passing, then she's not resting, you know? So as much as this book does discuss those two very specific things, the rest of the book talks about just what an icon she is, you know, and how much she set the tone for what popular music is right now,
Right.
you know? So it's not like it's this story of just rehashing things that we already knew just for the benefit of writing a book. Could have written any book, right? But this was like specifically to talk about Aaliyah in a way that we haven't talked about her at all.
The family has, or somebody from the family, spokesperson or whatever, has said that I believe, I don't know if it's your book or another book, but that this is an unauthorized Aaliyah book. What do you say to that?
The family didn't participate in the book, but they were the first people I reached out to. As soon as I secured the deal, I reached out to Rashad, and I was directed to the people who manage the estate, and they just asked not to participate. And it says it like right on the back of the book. It says this book was written without the participation of Aaliyah's family / estate. So it's not like I'm walking around town making it seem like I actually had some sort of a blessing. And I don't even know what defines a blessing when you're talking about a whole entity, like a legal entity, and then the actual family. But what I do know is the conversations were just not being had. So I wanted to have them as a fan, as a woman, like, you know, these things had to be talked about.
So let me ask you this. Is there something, and I don't know if it's talked about in the book or have you been privy to any information that makes the family's lack of participation, is there something more nefarious going on with cover-ups, with, like, I even know now, you know, Aaliyah's music is coming to streaming services. Not the first album's been out, but the first album is through Jive. And I believe that is, even R. Kelly still benefits, I think, in some way from that first album, or I don't know the politics there, but it doesn't go to the family, that first album. If you stream that first Aaliyah album, I don't believe the family benefits. Then there's these albums that are coming out now that were on Black ground, Barry Hankerson, Jomo Hankerson, but then if with that situation either, I noticed Missy and Timbaland aren't talking about this new Aaliyah music that's coming and available for streaming. So what's going on in the inner workings of all of that? Do you have any information?
Well, first and foremost, you know, I had read the contents of like a sealed document that had been signed in September of 1994. That was basically like an NDA where Aaliyah and her family and R. Kelly like couldn't ever speak about what went down, you know? So if you're going to tell the story, you know, I sold, before I even say anything else, I sold this book based on not telling that story. Like I specifically said I was doing 96 to 2001. That's how I sold it. But then I saw Surviving R. Kelly and they started talking about Aaliyah and I'm like, okay, I would be no better than anyone else covering up that part of the story without actually addressing what happens.
And that's the 15-year-old being married's part of the story. That
the
was
15-year-old being married, physical abuse, violence, grooming, control, pregnancy.
I think that I'm on chapter 3 right now. And as a fan, and I've chatted with Kathy about this, you know, I vaguely remember certain things. And when you really start reading everything in chronological order and start really trying to understand and realize how real this was, everything that was happening to a little girl, because she started at 12, and then to get paired up with R. Kelly, even you know, when she was just starting to record, Aaliyah was like 12, 13 years old. And then, you know, when you start understanding, like even in her interviews, the way she would, there's a quote in the book where she talks about sex appeal, and she says, "Oh, I've always had sex appeal. I was a hot 10-year-old." Like, what? And everyone's okay with this, you know what I mean? And at so many points of her life, people were trying to keep her age a secret. And it just really baffles me when I look at a 10, 11, a 12-year-old girl, because she's not a woman. She's a little girl. It just reminds me of how unprotected she was. And it like digs deep, because you feel like, God, everyone saw this happening and no one stepped in. And I'm not trying to take jabs at the family, but sometimes I would get angry. As I'm reading, I get very passionate, like, why didn't anyone protect her more? You know, and I know that people sometimes fall in love with the idea of like, this person's going to change my life forever. This artist forever. It's going to give him a brand new career. But it was, when you read the book, and what I appreciate about you, Kathy, is that you just state facts with no opinion. This is just exactly how it happened. And as a woman, it's very sad. It's very, very sad and heartbreaking. And I'm only on chapter 3 right now.
So go ahead, Kathy. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, someone asked me a short while back, and another journalist asked me, you know, are things better now? And I said, they can't be better because we never addressed the beginning as a problem. So how can you have a solution if you never talked about it like it was a problem?
Right.
You know, so no, it's not better. It's just, you know, hidden better.
So there's so many questions, right? So I lived as a media person. I'm on the radio since 1990. I see Aaliyah. I booked Aaliyah for concerts, right, in the 90s for radio station events, and she came by. I may even still have an old Aaliyah interview I got to go into my storage on Reel to Reel.
Wow.
For the one in a. And, you know, the One in a Million album, it was an amazing album, first and foremost. But secondly, like living in it at the time, it didn't explode as fast as the Age Ain't Nothing But a Number project. And so I remember speaking to Aaliyah about kind of the, you know, just it being slow, like, you know what I'm saying, and things not taking off as fast as she anticipated, and us talking about the album. And I met her mom during that period of time, and obviously this is later after all of the stuff we were talking about with regard to marriage. But I remember at the time being in media and being very confused on whether the marriage was real or not. Because, you know, we don't have internet. So there wasn't like you would read things in, you know, the R&B tabloids or whatever, but you didn't know what was like. It wasn't coming from, and even back then, it wasn't like an official news report that I recall came out and substantiated that this took place.
Yeah.
They were actually married until like years later. And I don't know if I'm remembering it right, Kathy, but did you find any of the details of the media coverage of that, you know, incident in Aaliyah's life? Easy to find, hard to find, to substantiate the truth?
Well, we found out months later, because I think it was the December issue of Vibe. That's when the marriage certificate was presented, but it was Torre with Kurt Loder. They kind of broke this story about this certificate. But the marriage happened in August of 94. A document was signed in September of 94 with the family and Aaliyah and R. Kelly and representatives. And then we found out in December of 94 And then apparently the marriage was annulled in February of 95. So when you look at that timeline, first of all, you're aware of the fact that within a couple of weeks, the family had already known. I think it was actually a day, really. So it wasn't as big of a shock. Like everyone, the way that the media portrayed it was that R. Kelly and Aaliyah secretly got married and just like were like he whisked her away somewhere and they had this, wedding. And then everybody found out. Like once the family found out, it's like, no, and look at the biopic, the Lifetime biopic. It was like, oh, we secretly ran off together, that kind of a thing.
So that's how the media portrayed it. Yeah,
like it was like this secret romance. But when you start to like dig deeper, what you find is that the marriage was not because it was a necessity for R. Kelly.
To protect him.
Yes, because if he was married to her, then impregnating her, any of that stuff, he's protected by the so-called sanctity of marriage.
How old is R. Kelly at this time?
He's 27 and she was 15.
And I remember reading that she had a fake ID saying that she was 18 when she got married.
Yeah, that's part of what he's currently on trial for.
Right, because he had paid government officials or a friend to give him fake paperwork saying that Aaliyah was 18, so that you don't need parents' permission to get married. But the reality is that she was
I do remember this
15 years
clearly.
old.
And me and R. Kelly ain't never been cool because I was very vocal among other media people about him being, because I heard that R. Kelly used to drive around the McDonald's after school in Chicago. Like, that was the thing that I was like, what? And from then on, I wasn't cool. And then you add that to the Aaliyah thing, and then I remember being like, age ain't nothing but a number. Wait, what? And then, you know what I mean? But it wasn't like...
It all adds up, and it was all in front of everyone's face. But people were so enamored, and the way the media portrayed them was like, guys, this is like this one.
Well, and then as a media person, you start feeling like you're jumping out the window accusing people of shit that you feel like is wrong, but
inappropriate.
They're okay with it, and then you start to feel weird. Like, wait, I'm telling people like, and then I didn't really know how old Aaliyah was at the time.
Well, because in interviews she would never say her age. She would always be like, "Shh, it's a secret."
That was a mess.
Yeah, it's
that was a stone cold mess.
It's chilling, man, when you read about it. Just because as a woman, now as a parent, even the thought of like protecting your children. And when I look at goddaughters, you know what I mean, that are 15 years old, it just really brings this darkness on you because you're like, you just cannot believe how this played out in front of everyone's eyes, in front of the entire world.
Also, and Kathy, I don't know, maybe you have some more insight on this too, just because you are an investigative journalist and somebody who's been working on this book for a while, but cultural acceptance in different cultures, in different regions, in different places on planet Earth. I distinctly remember, we have a culture, even here in America, right, where dudes used to joke and make this joke, and everybody who's listening, y'all remember, they would joke about girls and say, if there's grass on the field, play ball, right? That was like a thing. And I would always be very, very, very disturbed and get into arguments. I'm not going to bring up any names, but even here in the last 10 years, arguments with people where it's like, nah, she's 16, no, bro. She's 17. You're 26. But, I mean, as women, maybe even you and Laura, y'all could speak to it. But some of this also, we're talking mid-90s, there was still like, it was taboo, but it wasn't cancellation.
No.
It wasn't.
No, it wasn't.
It wasn't where it is today.
Oh, I'll say the phrase that I'm sure we all remember. Oh, she's a fast girl. You remember that?
They would put the blame on the young girl.
Absolutely.
She's fast. She's fast. So that used to be kind of like the acceptance. That was the green light. That was the grass on the playing field, so to speak.
Kathy, there was a headline I remember that came out before your book dropped, and I remember Ebro, you tweeted about it. you were like, wait a second. There was a headline that said, that Aaliyah was drugged before she got on that plane. But like, I've never heard of this before. And I think that people started coming for you, right? After they read that. So can you just clarify this and tell us what exactly happened?
So a couple things. First of all, I never said she was drugged and carried onto a plane. I think it's amazing where the drama goes when it comes to Aaliyah. It always just becomes this thing. And it really upset me. It really did, because that's not what I say. And, as a journalist, I spoke with people who were on the ground in the Bahamas that day, off record to some, on record to one very brave young man. And what was told, well, first of all, Aaliyah didn't want to get on the plane. And you remember the news back then, or the going rumor was, oh, she just wanted to get on the plane. She had to get home to Dame. She needed all of her luggage with her, all this stuff that was like being told to us, which wasn't true, essentially. So Aaliyah didn't want to get on the plane. She kind of locked herself in this cab. And she was sitting there and she had a headache. I mean, you're getting worked up. You see this tiny plane. You see all of this cargo. You see you and all of your passengers. And you're like, I'm not boarding this. I mean, Aaliyah was afraid of a Boeing, let alone a Cessna. You know what I mean? So she never liked to fly to begin with. So when you think about her kind of being like, I'm not getting on this plane, she had a headache. She kind of dozed off. Somebody came up to this young man that I spoke with and said, hey, can you get a cup of water? He gets a cup of water and they hand her a pill. And she takes, she takes it with a cup of water. And moments later, she's still kind of groggy going on this plane. And per the young man, he was like, she didn't seem to know what was going on. That's all I say. So making the decision for us all about what happened was something that the media did. And I didn't really appreciate that. But as a journalist, you can't hear that there was a pill handed to her. It could have been ibuprofen, it could have been anything. But I can't just be like, okay, so what else? You have to say what you heard. And a lot of people, the thing about Kingsley, the gentleman who handed her the cup of water, he was triggered by what happened with Kobe Bryant earlier last year. And it led him to make a kind of YouTube confessional about him being there with Aaliyah. And I had reached out to him and I was like, please pull this video down. And it wasn't for me to get some sort of exclusive information. It was because I knew that he was doing this from his heart and people were going to completely devour him. So he pulls down the video. Now, his whole family is part of hospitality, the aviation. We're not talking about some man who just did this conspiracy theory video, okay? We're talking about a young man who had been a part of the whole, he was the baggage handler for Aaliyah. His aunt was the cab driver. His stepmom was the other cab driver. They cooked for Aaliyah. They scouted locations for the videos. This is a person who was very much enmeshed in those couple of days while she was out there, right? And he finally wanted to talk, and everyone treated him like he was giving some sort of 9/11 conspiracy theories. That's not what happened. This is just a man who wanted to speak because he too, like all of us who were fans of Aaliyah, had a broken heart. I put mine into a book. He put his onto YouTube. So when I spoke to him and I got that story, he was 13 going on 14, right? The thing that's interesting to me is everyone said, oh, you're going to take the word of somebody who was 13, 14 years old? Okay, but hold on. You were okay with a 14-year-old Aaliyah being with R. Kelly. She was old enough. He was naive.
Right.
Doesn't add up.
Right.
And he remembers. I remember everything at 13 years old.
Right.
So, you said the book, Baby Girl, it's out now. People could go get it?
Yeah.
Yep.
Your intent was to celebrate Aaliyah, but you could tell even by having this conversation, it's tough to have a celebration of her and her music without, as you articulated, these kind of bookend traumatic occurrences in her story. The way we meet Aaliyah, which is, with the R. Kelly situation, and the way we lose Aaliyah with the plane crash. But in between there, in the book, talk to us about, just Aaliyah the person, the fashion clearly that's celebrated today, her style, the swag on R&B records, the singing, the style of singing, the very in many ways sweet, sensual, minimalistic ways that made Aaliyah's music so endearing to people, and what you found out in digging through that.
Well, the one thing that I found out that really kind of blew my mind was just how instrumental Aaliyah was to her own music. We always kind of define her sound by the people who helped her cultivate it, right?
Missy Timbaland,
Static Major. I mean,
right.
Even the guy from the earlier years. We tend to do that, right? But what I found out was like Aaliyah would get during the 1 in a million era, Aaliyah would get a reference track and hear it, go into the studio, and then freestyle her lyrics into it. And some may say, well, there was a reference track involved, and it's like, yeah, but like when you look at like hip hop artists who freestyle their tracks in studio, that's what Aaliyah was doing.
That's right.
Yeah. So that wasn't word for word that was going on. It was Aaliyah freestyling as she's hearing the song, and the thing was, Aaliyah was like musically a genius. Like she could retain sound, and she would hear a sound and then she could kind of like repeat it immediately in that exact octave. And I tell a story at the end. I do like a whole kind of photo series. One of the photographers, Eddie O'Cherry in London, he said that like at 15 years old, she used to in a key. Like when she was thinking, she's like, I'm trying to make it seem like I could sing, but you know what I'm saying?
But she kind of had a natural melodic tone to just her voice and her presence, which, is common in some of the greats.
Yes. And she would warm up singing opera before she sang her songs.
Wow.
So you have this woman with a flawless falsetto. You're forcing her to dance and make her like out of breath while she's trying to sing. So she struggled with that too, being told that she couldn't really sing. Right. When, I mean, even when you listen to the first album, when you hear At Your Best, you can tell like that she has soul, she has that voice. And through the years, what she was able to do was like, you could see Aaliyah, and she looked like how her music sounded. And her music sounded like how she looked. Like she was it was like a perfect combination. And in the book, like it doesn't end in a plane crash. She ends triumphant because her legacy is still going on. You go into Times Square, there's an Aaliyah billboard right now.
Right.
I don't know of any artists who really have that luxury, right?
Yeah.
So you think about that. And then like when you think about like the other genres that we've come to like kind of identify the subgenres, like trap soul, electro R&B. Like, who do you think started that?
Right.
All these artists that we now kind of define as rappers who are basically just singing over electronic beats, right?
Right.
Who started that? And we never give her credit because we're always so busy talking about how it was packaged for her, which it wasn't. Like, when you remove Aaliyah from the equation, that package isn't as strong.
Well,
not.
I also believe from this point forward, even with all the controversy, the family not supporting the streaming and whatever, taking place, it's going to be on streaming services.
Tomorrow.
Yeah. And so
Today.
I think that what you're talking about with people not giving her credit, some of it has to do with access to the material. And so if you notice in the world we live in today, a lot of when the younger generation who is now carrying the stories often on social media, if they can't just get directly, if I'm 25 and I can't get to your music to study it and hear it in context of everything else that's going on, it's tough for people to kind of be reminded. You know what I mean?
Definitely.
Oftentimes. And I think, and look, and there's definitely people out here that have a platform and are telling stories about music and things going on in culture that aren't well researched or weren't around, and so they remix history. That's just remixing history.
It's revisionist.
Revisionist history is very common. I mean, look at the United States.
Right.
Exactly.
So it happens at every level is my point. But you do have to do the work to remind people, and we appreciate you putting this book out and weathering this hectic Aaliyah storm of trying to get this story told and doing the work of a journalist, which is not always a heralded, celebrated situation to be in. So more power to you.
No, thanks. It really was to honor her, and you know, when you speak about the music and kind of understanding where it came from, you remember that saying years back when it's like, you say a Chrysler 300 looks like a Bentley until you see a Bentley.
Right.
That's what I think is going to happen when you have Aaliyah's music on streaming platforms now.
Right.
Like, you're hearing the Bentley.
Right.
So
that's facts.
You know.
Appreciate that. Thank you for that. Would that be a metaphor? Is that a metaphor or an analogy?
I mean, I'd like to define it as a bar.
Oh, a bar. Bar. Yo, that's a bar. Yo, Kathy, take care.
Kathy,
No, okay,
congratulations.
Great seeing you again.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.